which conspiracy theories were later proven to be true. Story 1. COINTELPRO. The FBI actually ran a secret program to spy on and disrupt civil rights groups, anti-war activists, and other political organizations they didn't like. This wasn't just passive surveillance either. They actively tried to discredit people like Martin Luther King Jr. and infiltrate groups like the Black Panthers. It all came out in the 1970s when activists broke into an FBI office and leaked the files. Answer: my great-uncle was friends with Mario Savio, most famous for the Sproul Hall Steps speech at Berkeley in the 60s. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. He gave one speech. One time in 1964 as a college student, and was involved in some student groups on campus, advocating for civil rights and helping people register to vote. For that, he was tailed by the FBI, the CIA, had his phone tapped, his mail intercepted and read or trashed, his taxes audited, his medical records stolen, received threatening calls at all hours, was falsely placed on a list of suspected presidential assassins to prevent his travel before we had official no-fly lists, and every employer, neighbor, friend, colleague, and eventually therapist he had for decades after that was visited by federal agents, sometimes identifying themselves as federal agents, suggesting he was a criminal, sometimes pretending to be other people in order to destroy his character, hurt his job prospects, ruin him financially, keep him isolated, and end his marriage. Despite all that surveillance and interference, he was never found to have any ties to any foreign organizations, nor to have committed any crimes. But they kept at it anyway, indefinitely. He had some idea this was going on, but of course nobody believed him, and he was dismissed as a paranoid loon, including my great-uncle admitted by him too, despite his having been visited by these folks himself. Until finally the thousands of pages of files on his life and all this concerted harassment came to light 3 years after his passing, for which no one ever received any reprimand, for which he never received any recompense. They'll destroy your life over nothing because they can, and no one will believe you. There's no reason to think this has changed. Story 2. TLDR, a conspiracy theory that South Korea and North Korea worked together to prevent a popular South Korean politician from being elected president, was actually proven to be true. In 1990s South Korea, there was a suspicion that there was some funny business going on to prevent a guy named Kim Dae-jung from being elected as president. Basically, he was a left-leaning politician who favored a more reconciliatory tone towards North Korea. South Koreans in charge obviously didn't like that. But surprisingly to some, neither did the North Koreans in charge. To legitimize their power, North Korea needed a South Korean enemy to fight against. Kim Dae-jung's friendlier approach would threaten that. So South Korean and North Korean officials cooked up a scheme. They met secretly in China, where South Korea gave money to North Korea to create border disruptions whenever Kim Dae-jung got too popular during election campaigns. This became so routine that South Korean citizens nicknamed it the North Wind. It was a conspiracy theory that North Korea would do something to sabotage Kim Dae-jung whenever he got too popular. Eventually, a South Korean spy blew it wide open. He was posing as a businessman from South Korea who was interested in filming advertisements in the North, meeting North Korean officials in China. In reality, he was working for South Korean intelligence to gather proof and details of North Korea's nuclear program. During one of those stays in China, he happened to be in the same hotel and proximity to the North and South Koreans in the scheme, and confirmed the scheme's existence with his North Korean colleagues. He gathered enough proof of what was happening to threaten to go public if they kept going with it. They didn't, and without the North Wind, it resulted in Kim Dae-jung winning the election. Kim Dae-jung eventually became known as South Korea's greatest president and won the Nobel Peace Prize for his North Korea strategy. This whole thing was dramatized in the film, The Spy Gone North. If you want to Google more, the spy's codename was Black Venus. None of this was publicly known until around the 2000s to 2010s, when the people involved were convicted. Story 3. I remember when rich people go to a remote island and molest children was a wacky conspiracy theory. Now we're all waiting for the Epstein files to be released. Answer. About 8 years ago, my very dear friend, who is a complete nutter that I love, went on a rant about an island with hookers and kids. He kept talking about government officials being involved and mentioned a list. I only vaguely remember because I was only barely listening. He often went on rants about conspiracy theories. Lizard people are a fave. I still gotta apologize to him when I see him. He moved to Albania about 5 years ago. He's now where we run if shoot gets wild here. I'm still amazed sometimes how right about everything he's turning out to be, lizard people aside. Story 4. Project Echelon. It was a conspiracy theory during the Clinton administration about the U.S. government monitoring domestic communication. We later found out it was true. Answer. Echelon was never a conspiracy. As a little kid in the 1980s, I saw a documentary about it on TV where one of the people discussing it built a satellite comms interceptor using a garbage can and parts from Radio Shack, or similar. They talked back then how it intercepted every digital communication being sent around the world. It was actually that event that triggered my love of hacking, security, and IT. Story 5. IDK about a theory as much as pretty much fact. MLB ignored the mass use of steroids in baseball, which peaked in the 90s and early 2000s because it was stimulating ticket sales following the players' strike in 1994, where public opinion and interest in baseball was dwindling. It gave them a quick rebound, and they only gave it attention when the health effects came to light more, and Congress got involved in the mid-2000s. Answer. My husband and I were just discussing the average score level in a game being so fudge low. His theory is that it's because there is no team-focused playing anymore. There is no club loyalty at all because players are chasing the money. What's a big way get on the list of big shiny numbers? Hitting home runs. And not just hitting them. Hit enough and you become a fan favorite. If you're attracting and getting cheeks in seats with all of the merch on their backs by being the darling who is smashing bombs, you are going to get paid. As a result, everyone is hitting for the fence. Every time, we get a game full of pop flies with a zinger or two. No fudge wonder people think baseball is boring. There is no strategy. It's lost the spirit of sporting. Take basketball, for example. A 2-hour game that ends with points in the hundreds is decided in the last 2 minutes, and it's by points usually in the low tens. It's every man for himself, for the money. Women's basketball is way more entertaining if you love sports. If you want celebrity with a side of talent, professional sports is for you. We watch more college softball and even Little League championships because it is entertaining, especially since we get to watch them develop and increase their talent. What does any of this philosophical wandering and blabbering 10 ARs after you commented have to do with your comment, you are probably wondering? My contribution to the discussion was that I pinpoint the beginning of this phenomenon to the 90s steroid explosion. Suddenly, it wasn't teams competing. It was people competing against Ecother. Whoever gets the most, insert arbitrary statistic here, wins. And this country loves a good race to the top. It revived the passion so many have for baseball. Revival equals money, which triggers pressure, which triggers the race to the most interesting statistic, which ignites a drive that is fueled by unsportsmanlike behavior and avoidance of the rules, and most likely the law as well. These statements are very, very broad generalizations, and any absolutes mentioned are hyperbole. Sorry for the prolonged philosophical monologue. I'm really sleepy, and although my body is screaming to rest, my brain apparently needs to scroll and then vomit words. Peace, love. Story 6. NSA mass surveillance program on U.S. citizens, allies defense apparatus, individual heads of friendly states, all while collaborating with big telecom companies to bulk gather data and pass it on to NSA in-house tools. It is flabbergasting how easily all this was swept under the rug in the name of terrorism by passing FISA law that not only protected NSA but also telecom companies too, retroactively too. Do people really know the tools NSA has? It's all very, very, very cool and very, very, very scary. Look up tailored access operations. These people are legendary. Edit. Darn. I come back from lunch and this post blew up. Don't come for me, NSA. Do some introspection. Answer. Yup. The NSA to me is basically the cyber intelligence warfare branch of the military in my eyes. I used to work as an emergency manager, and the NSA sent an instructor to PEMA, PA Emergency Management Agency, to give a course on cyber terrorism. Talked with him between sessions a fair bit, and hearing someone casually describing the access and capabilities they have is pretty fudge terrifying. The Internet of Things has basically been scoured for any potential use in espionage, from your smartwatch to your car's XM radio. Story 7. Tobacco companies knew about the dangers of smoking and withheld and falsified data for decades, probably condemning thousands of people to deaths from cancer or other smoking-related diseases. The Catholic Church covered up abuse by priests for decades. Answer. There's also been real revisionist history done by the tobacco companies. I hear people constantly ask why the lawsuits were settled for so much, because everyone knew smoking was bad for you. No, very clearly, the lawsuits are about how tobacco companies knew and actively lead campaigns mislead people. They bribe doctors to tell people smoking wasn't harmful. On top of that, they made the conscious targeted decision to target children with ads. Story 8. Watergate. The Martha Mitchell effect refers to a situation where a person's accurate perception of real events is mislabeled as delusional by medical professionals, leading to a misdiagnosis. It is named after Martha Mitchell, who was dismissed as mentally ill when she reported on illegal activities during the Watergate scandal, which were later confirmed to be true. Answer. I suppose you could add all the UFO whistleblowers up until recently. Lives were ruined, eliminated, and institutionalized. I recall the Japanese pilot reporting on that massive walnut UFO outside Alaska after being fired from Japan, military Orleans. Never heard from him again. All kinds of radar tracking, forced maneuvers, one other eyewitness still shut down. Story 9. There are people in the conspiracy subreddits paid to run interference on legit conspiracies that are posted there by manipulating the posters and comments into making people agreeing with the conspiracy look bad. Story 10. Snowden. Before that, we probably all assumed the government was probably spying on us, but to what extent was unknown, and to think the answer was everyone, all the time, anytime, was in conspiracy theory territory. Then Snowden was like, no, yeah, they know just about anything they could ever want to know about everyone, and whatever you do digitally is completely at their disposal, as well as plenty of things you do in the physical world. Workarounds like Tor just slow them down or deter, but if they really wanted you in particular, they can get around that too. Answer: I recall a friend of mine back in 2004 telling me his data scientist sister had told him about an NSA facility that was being built with huge data servers and power requirements that would only be necessary if you tried to be able to collect information on pretty much everyone. I relayed it to plenty of people who ranged from incredulous to, yeah, checks out. When Snowden finally came out, I was surprised it was news. Story 11. There were rumors that the FBI infiltrated civil rights and Black Power movements. Turns out, not only was it true, the rumors were spread by the FBI to further disrupt those groups. Answer: oh, they did a lot more than infiltrate. They would coordinate with local cops to arrest or assassinate activists, with the agreement that the cops would take the blame if anything was exposed. The cops would ask the feds to investigate anything they were accused of, and FBI would investigate and either clear them of wrongdoing or find a fall guy, who usually got a slap on the wrist and went to work for a different precinct. All the corrupt shoot cops do to cover up their modern crimes they learned during the civil rights and anti-war protests back in the 20th century, when groups like the Black Panthers decided they were done asking nicely. We had a minor civil war going on. Story 12. The Free Britney movement. It all started online as a conspiracy theory of her being held against her will. There were posts with videos of bodyguards watching her every move. People started to march for her freedom. It all ended up in court. It was proven it was the case, and she is gladly a free woman now. Edit. Typo. Story 13. Big Tobacco lying about how harmful cigarettes were. I was only a child, but my parents talk about how something so incredibly popular, like cigarettes becoming all of a sudden a cover-up for how terrible they are for you, was such a massive thing. My mom compares it to if it came out that milk is horrible for us and Big Dairy spent millions covering it up. Answer: know what's insane? Tobacco actually promoted women smoking as women empowerment and demonized men who told women they shouldn't smoke as misogynistic and who tried to hold women back. Funny, huh? Whole time they didn't give a F about bettering women and just wanted more people to smoke, to have more customers, and the men who tried to help women out of concern were stereotyped as women haters. Story 14. McDonald's vilified the older woman who got burned by their coffee by saying she was greedy faking when, in reality, they kept the coffee extra hot so it would stay fresh longer, and she had third-degree burns that scarred her severely. She really only asked for her medical lawyer bills to be covered. Story 15. That time, the United States military conducted secret chemical testing on unsuspecting residents of a predominantly black and low-income housing complex in St. Louis. During the Cold War, e.g. 1950s and 60s, the Pruitt-Igoe housing development was one of a number of sites across the U.S. chosen for testing where the Army would release particles of zinc, cadmium, sulfide, prolonged or repeated exposure, to which can cause cancer and damage to internal organs. The official purpose of these tests was to study how an aerosol agent might spread in various environments. Ostensibly, St. Louis was selected due to its similarities to Moscow, i.e., a densely populated area with similar architectural characteristics in some areas, accessibility to a large river, etc. The fact that the vast majority of residents being subjected to these dispersion tests were black was, of course, entirely unrelated. Then again, by the mid-1980s, the CIA would be deliberately funneling crack cocaine into black neighborhoods all over the country. So, Story 16. I remember back in 2017, I was serving a table, and I was joking with the dude at the table about how my husband told me he wanted to go shopping for winter boots. And literally, as soon as I opened FB, literally every ad was for winter boots. The guy was laughing along, but the girl got very quiet and seemed perturbed, so I took the hint and left quickly. As I was leaving, I overheard her say, "You don't really believe that shoot, do you?" And he was like, "What? That companies are listening to your voice to market things?" And she was like, "Yes, it pisses me off so much when people talk about that because it's just not true, and that would be such an invasion of privacy." Like, this lady was mad. I've always wondered how she's doing in 2025, knowing that not only is it true, it's fudge normalized and expected now, and a lot of people have a smart home that knows what they need for groceries before they do. Answer: I work in this space. No, your devices are not listening to you. Not in the way people think, at least. With that said, though, people put out an incredible amount of signals through their phone and everything else. Heck, there are even tools that let me see specific receipts of purchase. Yes, that 5 at 7-Eleven. We can see exactly what it was for and any other information a receipt has. All of these signals, covert and overt, are compiled and attached to an anonymized ID. Story 17. Martha Mitchell told the truth about Nixon's Watergate break-in crime, but initially was called crazy, a label applied by Nixon and her own husband, John Mitchell, who was Nixon's attorney general, close friend, and crinkly co-conspirator. In uptight mid-1960s, Martha often overshadowed John, being famous for her vocal honesty, unfiltered outspokenness, loudness, blunt, sassy, and funny quips, with a disarming Southern flamboyant style that was usually loved, but sometimes disliked by people with something bad to hide. Originally, she supported Nixon and his campaign, but his own actions repelled her. To the point she was openly criticizing him, crossing a line Nixon couldn't accept. Nixon and Mitchell plotted to silence her when she talked about the Watergate hotel break-in in her characteristically candid way, which was so shocking people initially didn't believe her. Being Nixon was still believed and very popular, Nixon and Mitchell conspired together, had goons kidnap her, or rather broke into her room to keep her prisoner, slightly assaulted and drugged her, keeping her prisoner in a hotel room for a week around when the Watergate break-in happened. When they let her go, she was livid. And the louder she protested, the more they told the media she was hysterical. Nixon and Mitchell panicked, trying to quiet rumors and distract the press about Watergate, which worked for a while. She was marginalized and humiliated by Nixon and John, branded crazy, and her popularity waned. After a year or two, the press and a Nixon insider admitting the plot unraveled and exposed the Watergate plot and related crimes, proving her initial claims were totally true. Nixon was forced to resign, and his handyman Mitchell and others were arrested and jailed. Martha eventually got credit for exposing Nixon's plot and earned a new respect from many women, knowing too well her plight in an era where women, when abused, were belittled, treated like property, expected to keep quiet no matter what. As the Watergate scandal, Nixon's crimes and resignation demoralized the country, people were eager to move on. Martha, who faded from public view previously after John left her having filed for divorce, taking custody of their child, Marty, to punish Martha, enjoyed a brief national resurgence of popularity and social vindication. Not long after she developed multiple myeloma, a rare form of bone marrow cancer. Battling it left her alone and isolated until her untimely passing within a year or so. The situation where one tells the truth is branded as delusional, but eventually is believed because they told the truth, was dubbed by a psychologist as the Martha Mitchell effect. There's a profoundly great documentary about it all on Netflix. I urge everyone watch if they can. It's sadly relevant today where aspects feel timeless. Very enlightening to see how politics really worked then, and how even famous, influential women were so easily vilified, mentally and physically abused for telling the truth, and those who believed her also mocked and branded crazy. This tactic is still used today, as everyone can see. Story 18. I always think of the Catholic Church covering up pedophile priests when these sorts of questions are asked. People knew about such priests and were aware that they were dangerous, and having such priests shuffled out of a parish when their behavior became known was there, without any recognition of the kids who were affected. The whole thing broke open as part of the Spotlight investigation. See the movie with the same name? It has expanded because this sort of thing was happening all over the globe. Answer: Australia held a royal commission into this, not just the Catholic Church. It was officially the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Abuse. Basically, the highest level inquiry possible. A lot of shoot got kicked up, but I'll always be mad that one worst of the lot managed to slither away and was given a state funeral. He was only, an archbishop. Story 19. I think the theory that back in 1980, Iran agreed to hold on to the hostages until after the November presidential elections to make Carter look weak and boost Reagan's chances has been pretty well substantiated. Somewhat relatedly, Ollie North and the Iran-Contra affair. During the administration of Bush Y, and with the apparent knowledge, if not direct involvement, of Cheney and Rumsfeld, North facilitated selling arms to Iran and funneling the profits to the Contra forces in Nicaragua. Answer: the thing is that neither of these are really conspiracy theories. Iran did sabotage Carter's re-election, but that's because they dislike Carter. If they were conspiring with Ronald Reagan to sabotage Carter, that would be a conspiracy theory, but there's no evidence for that. Similarly, the Iran-Contra affair was a conspiracy, but it was not a conspiracy theory because it only reached the public consciousness when the actual news broke and all of the legal proceedings went down. Story 20. Black helicopters. In the 90s, these were the equivalent of tinfoil hats. Conspiracy nuts would talk endlessly about totally silent black helicopters, modified Black Hawks that could move around at high altitudes almost undetected. The thing is, they were real the whole time. When the US government sent in SEAL Team 6 to bag bin Laden, they publicly announced that ST-6 dropped in on 2 silent black helicopters and had to blow one up to stop the technology from being recovered. That a thing they just said with their full chest, like it wasn't a big deal. Maybe it isn't, but I just imagined. A whole lot of conspiracy guys fist-pumping because a thing they've been saying for 20 years was proved true. Answer: I watched an episode of a UFO doc show that showed a black helicopter. One of the guys was ex-military and confirmed it was a military-grade helicopter, but was perplexed by how it was silent. I don't remember the whole context, but I think it showed up when they either got close to a particular area or they found something. It was wild to see it on TV. Story 21. There was a kid in school who told us his dad worked for the CIA doing mind control experiments using LSD on mental patients at the hospital in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. LOL. As if. Welp. MKUltra was real, run by the CIA at mental hospitals in Canada, and they used megadoses of LSD. They admitted to a lot of stuff, but never to the stuff in Moose Jaw. But there is no way this kid could have known this stuff decades before it came out unless he was telling the truth. Story 22. Mountain Meadows Massacre, Joseph Smith's conviction for scrying with rocks, and his very early conning of New Englanders for cash, his fleeing the jurisdiction after his Kirtland, Ohio money cons and escapades there and then, his polygamy, and his shooting his way out of jail during his drunken planned prison break. Denied, lied about, covered up. The whispers on the winds that anyone who believed in these conspiracies were Satan's minions. The pretense, the holy rituals devised to absolve those who participated of their sins, blamed on persecution and meddling outsiders, called tall tales and malicious lies when most of the whistleblowers were born in the Covenant or were true blue Mormon converts themselves. All